Hi guys, today we're going to have a general discussion and it's not going to be about my book. However, it's going to be about how to improve the academic standard of our country to suit the current world's economic growth strategies, especially to university and all tertiary students who will be our future leaders and accountable on the economic growth of our country. We are going to talk about opinions and strategies of prominent personalities that can help us on our endeavors that we are pursuing from today until the next 30 or more days to come. And this is aimed at developing new economic growth and stimulation strategies. So, in terms of education, we must all remember that the education system that we're having currently was inherited from the previous government. So this education system was not aimed and designed to teach you how to be resourceful, skillful, and have a knowledge. It was designed to teach you how to be a worker. So we want to see, using the opinions of this noble man, if we can, reach the levels that you want to reach in terms of growing the economy of the country. Because remember, we said our economy of the country was designed structurally, so we don't have resources anymore. So in order to turn it to be strategically, we have to look at other avenues, because that's the only pure and proper solution that can solve the economic struggles of the country. So we're gonna start with a gentleman called Lawrence Kelvin. Lawrence Kelvin, who created the Kelvin, the most sophisticated and powerful scale of temperature in the US, once said, I'll just take this from my book. He says, when you can measure what you are speaking about and express it in numbers, calculate the difference in terms of improvement, and determine the anticipated objective and profitability, then you know something about it. So we want to just clarify, what does he mean by what he's saying. What he's saying here, that in order to do anything successfully, you've got to be able to measure the tangible and intangible aspect, to use total quality as a tool in all activities, to do what you call product value analysis, to improve capital development and improvement, and many others. And what does it mean in a practical and current situation? Let's take a classical example. If you are a leader, leading and developing a country and educating the community in a unified manner, where communities are willingly compliant to the set goals and objectives of the country, and the population is about 1.5 billion. It means you definitely know what you're talking about and what you are doing quite well. We're taking this example, on a country that is China, where we see new ideas and ideologies being developed on a daily basis. And these ideas do not come from nowhere. They come from hard work, they come from dedication, they come from self-development, self-skillfulness, and many other aspects. So, if people are developed in such a manner, it can only be because they being educated at an early age about this aspect, the current prominent and important aspects of development. And we want to look at our South African aspect, when you talk about such matters. In South Africa, we've got a new term for retrenchment, which is called restructuring, especially in the banking sector. Most of the bank in the last few years or so have grown smaller and smaller. They have downsized themselves every time because they are using not so very clever structures. I don't even want to call it strategies. They are structures that are not so clever because they tend to replace technology. They tend to replace service by technology. You can never do that. Technology is a tool that you got to measure. And if you measure technology, you want it to benefit the overall activities of the company. So all the aspects mentioned above, they're not talking about the individual or division of a company, but they are talking about the overall aspect and elements of the company. Human capital development that we just mentioned, employees should know that it must be within themselves to understand that, I start work at 8 o'clock and then I knock off at 5 o'clock. And by that time, on a daily basis, I should fulfill requirements and an aspect. But if we do not have the required education and the level of skill, the level of self-discipline, the importance of using the equipment and the tools that we are using on a daily basis in an effective and appropriate manner, then we are a sinking ship. That is why in countries like China and Japan, if you start work at 8 o'clock in the morning, you must know that your tools are up to date, your abilities and capabilities are up to date, they will make you reach your goals or the goals of the company. So it is of utmost importance that we don't look at the human resource aspect only, we don't look at mechanisms that we're using, but rather we look at all the aspects, all the elements, all the equipment, all the tools. Because in South Africa, it is so normal that you go into a bank and you require some service and you're told that the system is offline. But in China or Japan, that's not the way to go. If you start working, if you start doing your work, you have to understand fully that starting off work time has got to produce the results of the day. And then the second person I'm going to refer to is Mr. Mandela. Mr. Mandela once said, the country's strongest weapon is its education system. You know, is our education relevant to what is required in a current economic strategies? Is our level of understanding of the required standard suitable to perform all the daily functionalities? He goes even further and says, in whatever you're doing, it always seems impossible until it is finished. So, yes, in olden days we had minerals, we mined them, sold them, but now we haven't got minerals anymore. They're diminishing. That's why the economy is climbing down. That's why our economy is degrading. You know. But it's not only the problem of South Africa. I always say that. You know, if one would have listened to the Secretary General of the United Nations, you know, Antonio Guterres, on his BRICS, on this BRICS summit that was held in Johannesburg recently, he spoke very strongly about countries that do not realize the fastness and the rapid economic growth of technology. In his own words, I quote, he said, some countries, as compared to the current economic growth strategies and technology, they are more like in the 1940s after the Second World War. They're thinking in the level of the people that were in the 1940s, you know, after the industrial development after Second World War or so. So that has to change. You know, like I said in a previous session, there are countries also battling in Europe and other parts of the world because they are not strategic. You know, they don't look at the long-term aspect of the development. You know, All right, and then I need to also to conclude by mentioning um, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa on his last, no, not even his last, on the 2022nd SONA address, where he raised concerns again that industrial, private industrial sector was not too convinced about the level of the education of the current student because it doesn't seem to suit their required level. So all these words by this gentleman, by Lauren Kelvin, include all the concepts of these people, these gentlemen. So we need, to look at how close or how soon can we close the gap between the economic growth strategies that are so technologically evolving in order to be able to be self-sustainable, to divert the country from the old structural development to the new strategic development. And what we must also take in consideration, the democratic dispensation that developed in 1994, was taken over again from the previous government, whereby all the resources was designated for only 10 or less than 10% of the population. So, if you consider that in 30 years' time, we expect to develop a country, that has been, or that the resources were designated for 10% of the population. And then we want to take the same resources and distribute to a population, 100% population. That's not so possible, So, let me give you another example. Take Orania, that the Afrikaner chose and said they're going to make their own small, like province and develop it in their way they wanted to develop it. Orania was formed far before the 1994 dispensation. And then by their hopes, you would have think that by now they would have developed drastically. They're small sized population. They can handle things the better way. But if you look at Orania today, it's exactly still the same at what it was more than 30 years ago when it was established. So yes, I always like to compare, in order for me to be able to achieve and reach the goal. So what we need to do, and in a broad way, take all the elements, the tangible and intangible elements of the resources of the country, and work on them to step by step achieve the goals. But we can only do that in a unified way, where all of us, I'm talking especially with the younger generation, because they're going to be the leader of the country. They're going to be looked upon to take the country to a certain level. But if we don't start with the basic elements now, I hope it's more like we're not going to reach our destination, our goal and objective, because I think almost every country in the world that has got the resources, or minerals or whatever, they're working towards preserving them, creating skills in their own country. Yes, we don't have many minerals anymore, but we can still do something with the little we got and try and change our economy strategy. Like I said, in many cases, in many times, that Japan, Russia, China, and many others. These people 30, 40, 50 years ago, and they were never in business industry. They were never successful. They were farming and doing all sort of things. But if you look at them today, as a nation, unified as they are, it's doing it for the country. So I also wish that we can also do it for our country. I'm so passionate about this country. It's my country. I've never been anywhere else except in this country. I also wish that one day the words of this gentleman can change the mindset of our young society, so that in a unified way, in a long term, they can achieve the goals and objectives. But it can only be strategically, research and development, tactically, and innovative. So for us as a country, I wish us all the best. Thank you.